So give me a rundown of where we are at this moment in the build.
Well, Andrew, we're busy putting back all the suspension components. Sean and Willem are working hard. And yeah, so Saturday the guys came in, they did all the suspension bushes, put them all in. They really went in nice and easily. You know, the feedback was great. It's a good Elastomo bush, well designed, easy to fit. So we're really happy with that. The shocks have gone in. Suspension brakes have all been built up now, and the hubs have gone back on. So all the wheel bearing kits have been fitted with new seals, and it comes complete together as a kit, which is lovely. And you can see these lovely shiny brakes, lovely quality. Of course, you've got your handbrake inside here, and it's the first time you feel it. Really feels really nice. You've got a different feel on the inside here. You can feel and of course the new handbrake shoes, new wheel bearings, and everything's going to go back on here. And of course, then we can get the wheels on.
I'm Andrew St Pierre White. Join me as I share my passion for building four-wheel drive trucks and then travelling to the remotest parts of the world.
Time to talk about brakes.
Yeah, how many of us have driven down a mountain pass with a heavy vehicle, sitting on the brakes, and suddenly the brakes have gone to brake fade and the pedal's gone to the floor?
Okay, quick story.
Have it.
I was in Geelong. The guys at Multidrive discovered my troop carrier's standard brake rotors were very badly scored, and Terrain Tamer came to the rescue and they sorted out some new rotors and pads for me. And I was up in the Highlands, the Victoria Highlands, and I had the lady next to me was part of the whole production crew, organising absolutely everything, and we were chatting. And I was going down this hill, still in high range, and it was quite steep. And this little voice at the back of my head saying, "You're in high. You should be in low for this." I mean, I was using the brakes a lot, okay, and I didn't smell anything, and I was lazy, and I was chatting. She was delightful company, and then suddenly my pedal started feeling extremely soft. So for nonchalantly not letting, well, it's fine, you know, it's not a problem at all. And I actually put the handbrake, and I pulled the handbrake up just to give me a little bit of and stop the vehicle, and I put it in low range and carried on going, and those brakes were actually starting to fade, and they were the Terrain Tamer brakes. The standard brakes would have done that long ago, and that I was being complacent because I had these new clever brakes. So anyway, we've all done it.
We've all done it, and I think what I always say is, you know, when you're going to take a vehicle that's much heavier, the braking distances are going to change, because suddenly what your vehicle, when you drove it in here, and now we add a lot of kit and weight to it, the momentum, and you try and stop something that's heavy, you need more brakes. You're going to have to apply more brake pressure, you're going to have to give more distance. So it's something to be very aware of. So when you add more weight, how about improving the brake efficiency, and how do we do that, and what do we do and what don't we do? So brakes, as I said to you, my highest value is safety, your safety. So why am I going to compromise your safety by giving you bad brakes when I know there are really good brakes on the market that are going to be more efficient for the weight you're carrying? So I always say to people, we will be upgrading your brakes, we will be spending money on that, we'll cut back somewhere else, because that's safety critical.
So you're basically saying if you're going to cut back on anything, it's not
brakes.
It's not the brakes.
Not brakes.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
So if you looked at this brake disc we've got here, okay, this is actually very good condition still. Okay, if I feel it, it's got a few ridges on it. If I measured the thickness of it, it would tell me if it was undersized or if we could still machine it. If I was going to drive this car, or you were going to drive this car, and we weren't taking it to fully prepared over expedition vehicle, you would machine these, check the size, put new brake pads in, happy days, keep driving. Okay. If you get to a point where you're now going to go and load the car up like we're doing in building, do yourself a favor. A lot of people make good brake discs, and these ones are equally as good, and I really like them. Always nice when I come out the packet. Okay, so we have a look here. Now compared not huge comparison. I mean, you can probably visibly see a little bit of thickness difference. Okay, these may have already been machined. They are ventilated, but the difference here is that they're actually drilled and they're grooved. So the braking efficiency of these brakes, together with brake pads that match the material they've used and good quality brake pads, are going to give you a much better braking efficiency. So you're going to be able to stand on the brakes and you're going to slow the vehicle down much quicker, more efficiently. What people don't do is when they get new brakes, you've got to bed brakes in. If I fit these for you now, the first 400 or 500 kilometers driving gently on the brakes. You need to bed the brakes in. You need to really let it settle in nicely. So that's important. It's important that you actually check the brakes regularly at your 5,000 k intervals to check how the discs look, how the wear on the pad is.
So just explain to us the advantages of the holes and grooves.
So effectively you're getting better cooling.
Yes.
And you're getting better grip. So if I take my hand and I'm trying to grab and lift this up like this, okay, I'm trying to lift this up just with my fingers. Okay, it's got the hub in. It's going to be more difficult because my hand's slipping. If I grab here, I've actually got a bit more grip. I don't have the same weight, but my fingers are actually gripping a bit. So it is about making it a better surface to slow you down and be more efficient on the brake pads. You've only got these little blocks. Oops. Well, they do pass the drop test. Okay, so here we've got the brake pads. Okay, these are your front brake pads. They're going to go against there, one either side. Okay, and this is all that's going to, when you press the pedal, grip the disc and slow you down. They've beveled them nicely. You get lots of really good brake pads, you know, and I know that the terrain tamer would have chosen. So the bevel's often put there just to stop them squealing. I found that brake dust collects on the discs, and in my experience, maybe tell me different, but basically this reduces the amount of squeal you get on brakes. It's able to get rid of brake dust because this is what wears. This part of the brake pad wears. That's metal. And so, yeah, good quality brake pads. If I'm looking at the thickness of the brake pad, you can see how thick it is. Okay, it's a good almost 10 millimeters. Once it gets down to 50%, I'm really considering changing the brake pads, because I've seen pads that get too thin, and what ends up happening on the material here, it starts cracking, because people have actually run them too low. They actually run them right up almost to the metal, a millimeter off the metal. Once you hit the metal on metal, you can throw these discs away. It's actually the last thing you want to do. So proper maintenance, proper checking of the brakes, proper monitoring, and anyone can do that. Have a look at the brakes, understand the thickness between the metal and the disc, and you can see there's a groove there, and understand how much. And you really, if it got to the bottom of that groove, you really are going too low, in my opinion, with a heavy loaded vehicle. You're carrying a lot of weight here. So I don't compromise. If I have to take a set out and it's on 50%, I might even go a bit less than 50%, but 30%, I would never go less than that. I'd rather actually put new pads in. And if I'm putting new pads in, I need to make sure that this disc is actually also in good condition.
So you were saying earlier that the engine bay looks quite good. What did you mean by that?
Engine bay tells me a lot about what's happened in the life of the car, because people get lazy and they start fitting stuff and they start moving stuff around. So when I looked at your engine bay, the integrity of the engine bay, batteries that get fitted underneath, okay, got a bit of rust here, but it's actually in good condition. When I look at some engine bays, I see stuff has been mounted, and particularly batteries badly mounted, and that rips up some of the inner wings. Now it's a lot of weight to put a battery in the front of the car here, and when it's not fitted properly, not stayed, when I say the strap at the top not fixed in, you find that actually does a lot of damage to here. And I often see people putting two batteries on the front wing, typical on the Troopies, and they fit a battery there and a battery there. And over the years I found that it starts cracking up inside the wings on bad roads. It's a lot of weight, it's a really lot of weight, and so we're able to, in this car, to spread the main battery here, an auxiliary battery there, or in time batteries in the car. So you know, the integrity of the pipes, the power steering pipes down on the cross member aren't all rusted. These pipes here. On the steering box you've got these steel pipes that come along here. Now quite often you find those have been rusty or they're damaged. The pipes, the fittings. So we know we're going to change these hoses. These are the heater hoses. We're going to also change these fuel hoses. And what happens with fuel hoses over time, they get really hard, and actually when you squash them here, little cracks are often, and I can feel here, if I squash this, there's cracks there. You can actually see there's a crack in this, okay? You can see the cracks there. So if I was reusing this hose, I would chop some off and I'd push it back on, because I actually don't want this hose loose, because that's what happens, or it sucks air in. If it sucks air in, it's compromising the fuel system. This isn't expensive, so we're going to change them. And we're also going to be fitting different fuel filter in the engine bay here, which we'll come back to at some stage.
The electrical system is not looking terrible, but they have made some modifications which is about the same standard as with the gearbox, isn't it? I mean, look at this, it's terrible.
So on the wiring side here, what I'm looking for when we come back to sort of refurbish, tidy up, sort out, is to remove any of the wiring that people have fitted that's not Toyota, because that for me is often not done properly. This wiring is not sleeved. This is a sort of sleeving. It's just loose wires. Here's a relay. It's got terminals on. There's a positive coming in there. If this had to fall off and come loose, and they can do, and short out, it's not sleeved.
I would have no fan.
You'd have no fan, and also this can short out because it hasn't got a sleeve over this. So it's just not done in a way which...
fused?
It's fused,
yeah. It's
fused. And look here, look at this connection here.
Terrible.
Okay, terrible. So all that's happening with these connections is you've got a really thick wire, really thin wire. This builds up resistance, and of course, as we know, it breaks down the main earth wire to the whole car. And look how poor this is. So this here, this is all this tire. It's corroded. Okay, we'll put a new earth wire. This little earth wire to the body here again. That needs to be cleaned out. So problems on electrics, often, as you know, come from bad earth.
Oh, bad earth, and that is, they've broken 12 books, 12 rules, from rule 1 to rule 12. They've broken them, every single one of them, right here. It's terrible.
So how are we going to improve it? We're going to put new battery clamps on.
Yeah.
Because quite often these, either some of them stretch. So what happens when they stretch, they're not tight on the battery terminal anymore. They get corroded. We're going to put a nice new earth wire here. We're going to improve this wire. We're going to get rid of all these little wires because they are aftermarket wiring, which is not going to work anymore because we're taking that fan out. Okay, and we're going to go back and check the integrity of all the connections that we can here. And this has been taped up, these wires here. And I actually want to untape all this and check the integrity of the wires again, because now's the time to do it, so that all the Toyota wiring, which is all here, okay, we need to make sure that insulation tape over time comes undone. And it doesn't take much to take a roll of insulation tape and just retape some of this up so that all the wires are nicely insulated and they're protected. So if you look at an engine bay and the wiring is nice and tidy, everything's taped up nicely, it's zip tied, it's not all over the place, there's chance of a problem. The big risk on any sort of trip is a wire can rub against a bit of metal and short through. You may not ever experience it around town because the car doesn't do a lot of movement, but on bad roads, a wire coming and rubbing up against a piece of metal like this doesn't take long before it goes through and you have a massive short. So we want to make sure the wires that we add in, anything we add to the car, is going to be properly done, properly fused with really good terminals, so that your auxiliary power system, when you do fit it, is done as good as what Toyota did for their own car. When people have gone and added to wiring looms, or they've taped up, so the telltale for me was, there's the normal sleeving, and someone had gone and taped this up, and it didn't actually look like it was Toyota original. And when something's not Toyota original, I sort of start worrying. Now, what have they done? What's inside? Wiring is often the biggest bane of any problem on a trip, because it's difficult to trace, and if you haven't got a good understanding of electrics, you want at least your original Toyota wiring to be as good as possible. And the aftermarket wiring that you wire in for dual battery management systems needs to be even better. but generally that's put in afterwards, and you can get a good explanation as to what's been put in and how it's been put in. So I like to go through the harnesses and undo stuff and then see what I find, and quite clearly, so this is running to the alternator here, and what people have done here is they've taken some wires. This is quite a thin one. This is original wiring, and added this great chunk of wiring here, probably just not even soldered, wrapped over. There's 3 more wires to lengthen it. Why, I don't know. So as we undo all this, we can go back and repair these. So it's important to look through all the wiring and see. First of all, check the wiring at the plugs here to see that, first of all, it's not compromised, hasn't pulled out, and tape comes loose. This old tape comes loose, so take it off and just take time and retape these wires. Often I find, like here, I can feel there's something not right in this wire here. Someone's done something here, and I'm sure if I take this off, there's a wire that's been added in or bent over or joined, and again it just adds another complication to the wiring. So by taking your time and going through all this and just nicely, if it looks good, it generally is good, you're going to make sure that you reduce any problems. That's what